Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm, and in this video we are going to start working on parallaxing. So what this means is basically I want some objects in the background and in the foreground to kind of move as my camera moves. But I want them to move at different speeds depending on how far away from the player they are supposed to be, right? So here's what I mean by that. Imagine you had a mountain all the way in the background, right? So let's just drop a mountain in there. You had a mountain all the way in the background of your game. Well, when you're moving in relation to that mountain, say -15, so it's all the way back there. When you're moving in relation to that mountain shouldn't move too much, but there should be a little bit of movement, right? Because in the real world, whenever you move, and something is in the distance, it changes its position based on where, because your perspective changes, right? And so imagine I had that going on in my game. Well, that will add some depth and give me some nice, give me a nice 3D thing, right? So I have my midground object, which is this mountain. I've just dropped it in here. It's its own object here in Unity, and I've set it to X and Y on the X and Y in the game. So here's the other thing though. If your camera's not at X or not at 0 on the X and 0 on the Y, then this is gonna have to be different. You're gonna have to make sure it's set so that it's right in the right position for your camera. Okay, and then the other thing I wanna do is I wanna actually make this into a tiled thing. So that it repeats itself throughout the level. So let me do that. Let's go up here to draw mode where it says simple, and instead of simple we're going to use tiled. And then with that changed, what I can do is here on the edge I can click my little double-headed arrow and I can just drag it out. Just a bunch so that I can extend it throughout the entire level. Okay. All right, probably won't even need that much because it's not going to move too much, but at least it's a continuous mountain that's going to change over time. Okay, perfect. Now if I were to play the game, we could see that there's a whole mountain range back there, which we probably don't want because we want this to move again in relation to the camera, right? Or to the player. So what we need for that is we need a script. So let's go into scripts. Let's right click, create a new C# script, and we'll call it Parallax. Sure, P-A-R-A-L-L-A-X, Parallax. That's what this is called. Okay, I don't know why that, let's open it up. Okay, there we go. So in my Parallax script, we only really need a couple of things. First, we need a public value. Let's call it a vector2. And we're going to call this parallax effect multiplier. I know that's kind of a long variable name, but it does describe exactly what we're going to put in here. We're basically going to say, I want to multiply the parallax effect by a certain value. And we're making it public so we can change it in the Unity editor. We need a couple of private variables as well. I want a private transform to get the camera position, so the camera transform, and then I want a private vector3 so that I can get the last camera position. Okay, so I want the transform of the camera object, and I also want the last position the camera was in. All right, and what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to figure out the difference between those and change how fast this thing moves in the background based on that. Okay, now in the start method, let's go ahead and assign values to these. Transform. So the camera transform is going to equal camera.main.transform. Oh, I spelled transform wrong. There we go. So that's going to take my camera's transform component and apply it here. And then the last camera position is going to equal camera transform dot position. Okay. Perfect. Now what we want to do is we want to start using this to do some math and figure out how fast this thing's going to move. The problem is we don't want to use update. The reason why is because update is going to happen at the top of the frame draw. Basically, update happens every frame. As soon as we have a new frame, it's going to run everything here. Now, we have update methods in a bunch of our other scripts that are also doing things at the same time. This, we wanted to actually update after everything else has happened. Because if not, then it's going to start getting confusing and it's going to look weird on the screen. We want this to happen at the very end of our frame calculations among all the scripts that we are using. So we're going to use what's called late update, not last update. Late update. That it means this is going to run at the very end. It's going to be called every frame, but at the end of that frame call. All right. So first thing we need to do is we need to figure out the difference between our camera's position and its last position. So to do that, we need a vector 3. We'll call this delta movement. All right. And then we'll say camera transform dot position minus last camera position. So that's going to give us the very basic difference between the position that it was in last time and the position it is in now. Then what we want to do is we want to add to the transform position. We want to take the transform position and add to it based on the calculation of our camera distance. So transform.position plus equals, because we're adding to it, we'll say new vector 3. And so the three values we're going to give it is delta movement.x times the parallax effect multiplier.x. So that's the x value. The y value is going to be exactly the same. Let's copy it, except that we're applying it to the y. So delta movement dot y, parallax effect multiplier dot y. And it's a vector 3, so it needs a z. But you know what? I don't think I need to apply the z right now. I can just leave it be. Yeah, I can just leave that there. That's fine. If it gets mad at me later, I'll come in and fix it. And then what we need to do is we need to change the last camera position to equal camera transform dot position. Okay. So this may not make sense. Basically what we're doing is we're just moving this object that we have the script attached to based on the camera movement. It's moving in relation to the camera movement. But once you have all this written, let's go ahead and attach it to Unity. And once it updates, let's add our parallax script to our midground object. Okay. Now notice that we have a parallax effect multiplier. We have x and y. I'm going to set my x to 1. See what happens. Let's run it and see what happens. Nothing. Okay. Now, it is definitely changing. Let's try 5 and see if that does anything. Oh, look at that. Oh my gosh. Now that's really moving. So I know it's going to have to be between 1 and 5. Let's try 2. That's moving really quickly as well. So between 1 and 2, let's say 1.1. That's kind of moving. Oh, let's say 0.9. Let's try that. That feels better. Okay. Yeah, that feels a whole lot better. Now, I'm not getting any movement on the y-axis, which is kind of what I want. But let's try it out. Let's see if movement on the y-axis feels nice. Oh, no, it doesn't. My mountains are just slamming up and down in the background. Okay, so no movement on the Y. We've learned our lesson here. Okay. All right, so I like that. That looks nice to me. It's just a little bit of subtle movement in the background. It's nothing too crazy, but it adds some depth to it, and it makes it feel like there's a little bit of a difference. Now, the moon going up and down based on my character's position, maybe I don't like that very much. But I made it a child of the background, so in order to move that off, let's try that. Let's do this here. Let's move it off of my main camera, and let's apply this parallax script to it, but we'll give it 0 and 0. That way the moon stays where it's supposed to stay. Oh gosh, never mind. That didn't work. Okay, well, 1 and 1. There we go. That's what I was looking for. So the moon stays exactly where it's supposed to stay. Oh no, it's actually kind of moving the same. Yeah, it's the same effect as making it the main camera child. So it's up to you, whatever you want to do. In order to fix that, I would have to write a completely different parallax script, which I'm not going to. Anyway, so that's working. Now let's get our foreground in. And I'm just going to drop that back into the camera. And I'm going to get rid of that parallax script. Let's remove that. Okay. So now we just need to get the foreground moving. So we'll drop that in. We'll put it at 0, 0. And then I'm actually going to move it up just a little bit. Kind of like there. That looks good. I'm going to set it at -10 order in layer. I want to change the draw mode to not sliced, tiled. And I want to tile it all the way out. Okay. And then I'm going to add the parallax script. And let's set this. So if my other one was 0.9, let's set this to, I don't know, 0.5 and 0 on the Y. Let's see what happens. So that moves a lot more than the mountain does, which is exactly what I'm looking for, right? Because I want the foreground objects to move more than the background objects, okay? Now 0.5 is probably a little bit much. Let's try 0.7. Yeah, that feels a little better. Cool. Anyway, so now we have parallaxing going on, and it's really, really easy to implement. It really did not take long for us to implement this strategy in our game. We've got jumping, we've got movement, we've got a camera controller script, we've got parallaxing in the background. Our game is looking pretty good at this point. I'm really happy with it. In the next week, in the next 2 weeks maybe? How many weeks? In the next, yeah, I think a couple of weeks. Anyway, from now until the end of the term, we're going to focus on improving this game and making it as good as it possibly can be. Maybe adding another level, add some enemies, add a end level state, add collectibles, that kind of stuff. We're going to do all of that in the next couple of weeks. Okay. So for now, as long as you have your camera controller script working and your parallaxing working, go ahead and turn in this project, and I will see you guys next week.